My name is Alara. For most of my life, that name has felt like a quiet, unassuming thing, a soft-spoken title for a woman who lived a soft-spoken life. I was born and raised here in Port Blossom, a town that clings to the coast like a barnacle to a ship's hull, where the scent of salt and pine needles hangs in the air and the rhythm of the tides dictates the pace of our days. I was the only child of two gentle souls, a librarian and a history teacher, who filled our small cottage on Maple Lane with books and quiet affection. I married Mark when I was 28, and for a quarter of a century, our life together felt like a calm, predictable current. We had two children, Leo and Chloe, who grew up chasing waves on the shore and catching fireflies in the long summer dusks. They are adults now, charting their own courses in cities far from the sea-misted windows of their childhood home. Leo, my thoughtful, steady son, is studying architecture, while Chloe, my bright, passionate daughter, is a budding journalist. With the nest empty, it was supposed to be a time for Mark and me to settle into a comfortable rhythm, two ships moored side by side in a quiet harbor. I was 54. It was an ordinary life, but it was mine, and I was content. I believed I would simply continue to age this way, like a piece of sea glass slowly smoothed by the years. But the tide of a simple life can turn with astonishing speed. That change came for me on a gray autumn afternoon. My father, Arthur, had a heart attack while tending his beloved roses. It was swift and unmerciful. He was 70, a man who still read poetry to my mother and could name every constellation in the night sky. Our small family fractured with the force of his absence, but no one was more shattered than my mother, Eleanor. The light in her eyes, a reflection of a 50-year love affair, simply went out. She drifted through our family home like a ghost, her grief a heavy cloak she couldn't shrug off. "You have to eat, Mama," I'd plead, setting a bowl of her favorite soup before her. The aroma of rosemary and thyme, once a comforting scent in her kitchen, now seemed to have no effect. She'd pick up the spoon, her hand trembling slightly, and look at the bowl as if it were a great puzzle. "I know, dear. I just can't seem to find my appetite. It feels as if there's a stone lodged right here," she would say, her hand fluttering to her chest. My brother, Daniel, who lived several states away, and I initially believed it was the profound weight of sorrow. We watched over her, calling daily, visiting as often as we could. But in the space of a month, she became a fragile, hollowed version of herself. The soft curves of her face sharpened, and her clothes began to hang on her delicate frame. A deep worry took root in my heart, and I took her to see Dr. Alastair, our family physician for decades. The diagnosis was a quiet, brutal blow: pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive, the doctor explained in his gentle, somber tones. Too advanced for surgery. She had, perhaps, a year. The world tilted on its axis. I had barely begun to process the loss of my father, and now I was being told I had to prepare to say goodbye to my mother. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing pressure in my chest that stole my breath. But I knew I could not crumble. Daniel had his own family and a demanding job so far away, the mantle of care would fall to me. That evening, I sat down with Mark in the sterile quiet of our own home, the company house provided by his employer, Streamlined Shipping. The air was thick with unspoken things. "I need to go and live with her, Mark," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I can't leave her alone in that big house. Not now. She needs someone to look after her, emotionally and physically." Mark looked up from the quarterly report he was reading. His expression was not one of sympathy, but of mild irritation, as if I'd just announced the plumbing had burst. "Alara, we just went through all the unpleasantness of your father's funeral. Now you want to be dragged into all this? It's going to be a disruption." The word disruption stung. "She's my mother," I said, my voice tight. "She's dying. What else would you have me do? I can't just drive her to appointments and then leave her to fend for herself. She'll be so lonely." I took a breath, trying to find a compromise. "If it's too much for you, Maybe I can just stay at Maple Lane for a while on my own. His brow furrowed in indignation. And who's going to manage this house while you're gone? Who's going to cook my dinners? Do the laundry? A cold silence fell between us. The questions were so practical, so self-centered, they felt like small, sharp stones thrown at my aching heart. I had intended to come back to manage both households as best I could, but hearing him lay out his needs so starkly made me realize the imbalance of it all. If someone had called me selfish for wanting to nurse my dying mother, I would have had no defense against his brand of logic. I was sure my mother, ever considerate, would have told me to stay put, not to upset my own life. But the pull to care for her, to give her the same comfort she had always given me, was a force stronger than anything else. I looked down at my hands, unable to meet his gaze. Finally, he let out a long, martyred sigh. Fine, but don't expect me to be involved. I'm not helping with any of it, you understand. His words were graceless, his tone begrudging, but he had agreed. I swallowed the knot of resentment in my throat. I'm sorry, I whispered. And thank you. In that moment, I suppressed every instinct to argue, to point out his lack of compassion. I simply thanked him for the bone he had thrown me. So we moved. We packed up our life in the modern, impersonal company housing and relocated to the rambling, memory-soaked cottage on Maple Lane. Mark was an only child, and his parents, Richard and Brenda, had always made it clear they expected us to move in with them eventually, once Mark's career wound down. We had never bought a home of our own, content to save money in the subsidized company lodging. In a way, the move to my mother's was a financial boon for us. The rent was gone, and the house was spacious. I tried to tell myself it wasn't all bad for Mark. He was true to his word. He did not help. He treated our new living situation like a temporary, unpleasant hotel stay. But I was grateful for every moment I had with my mother. She had days of surprising energy, where we would sit in the garden and she would tell me stories about the Latin names of the flowers my father had planted. But more often, she was weak, spending long hours resting in her favorite armchair, a faded chintz throne overlooking the wisteria vine that snaked across the porch. I cooked for her, coaxing her to eat small, nutrient-rich meals. I read to her from my father's poetry books. I managed her medications, a complex cocktail of pills that kept the worst of the pain at bay. It was a rhythm of care that would have been impossible for her to maintain alone. I'm so sorry for all this trouble, Ilara, she would say, her voice thin as parchment. Thank you, my love. It's such a comfort to have you here. I should thank Mark, too. She was blissfully unaware of the bitter arguments and his resentful silence. In her eyes, he was a good man for allowing this, and she was grateful. One evening, long after my mother had drifted off to sleep, Mark came home from work. I served him his dinner, and as he ate, I tried to talk to him about a new treatment option the doctor had mentioned, more for comfort than for a cure. He held up a hand, his fork halfway to his mouth. I don't know what you want me to say, Ilara. I told you, I'm not involved in this, he said, his voice flat. He refused to even engage. I wasn't asking for his opinion on the medical science. I was asking for his ear, for the simple comfort of a shared burden. I needed a partner to lean on, just for a moment. But the wall he had built around himself was impenetrable. Weeks turned into months. Mark's attitude curdled from passive non-involvement to active resentment. He complained constantly about the commute, the scent of lavender and old books in the house, the somber atmosphere. He acted as though he were performing a great, noble sacrifice, and his behavior grew more obnoxious by the day. Yet I said nothing. I was walking a tightrope, balanced between the immense emotional weight of my mother's decline and the fragile ego of my husband. The stress was a constant, low-grade hum beneath the surface of my days. Just shy of the one-year mark, my mother's condition declined sharply. She was moved to the quiet palliative care wing of the local hospital. 5 days later, wrapped in the pale morning light, she slipped away. The grief, though expected, was an ocean and I was adrift. Daniel and his family flew in immediately. My own children, Leo and Chloe, rushed to my side. Their presence was a balm to my raw soul. In times like these, you expect your spouse to be your anchor. But Mark was a ship passing in the night. At the funeral home, while my brother and I numbly made arrangements, Mark stood in a corner with his parents, Richard and Brenda, laughing at some private joke, completely disengaged from the sad business at hand. At the service itself, I motioned for him to sit with me, Daniel, and the children in the front pew, the space reserved for immediate family. "Scott, I want you here with us," I said, my voice a whisper. He shook his head. "No, I'm fine back here. I'm not blood, after all." "But you're my husband," I pleaded, the words catching in my throat. It was then that my mother-in-law, Brenda, stepped forward, her hand resting on Mark's arm. "He's your husband, Alara, but he wasn't Eleanor's son. Mark is our son. He's an outsider to this, really. It's proper for you to be up there with your family." The cruelty of her words, delivered with a placid smile, was breathtaking. I was left speechless. In our community, it was customary, a sign of respect, for a son-in-law to sit with the grieving family. With Mark and his parents seated several rows back, a ripple of whispers spread through the mourners. I could feel the speculative glances, the questions hanging in the air. Are they separated? It was a petty concern in the face of my loss, but it was a hurt that could have been so easily avoided. As I sat there, watching my mother's casket, I felt an acute, piercing loneliness. My husband was not by my side. After the burial, our small group returned to the house on Maple Lane. I moved through the familiar rooms in a daze, automatically offering tea to my in-laws. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice hollow. "I know it was a long drive for you." Brenda gave a short, brittle laugh. "Well, it's quite something, isn't it? First your father, now your mother. These funerals are a financial drain for everyone involved, but at least that's the end of it now." I stared at her, stunned. The end of it? The casual callousness of her remark felt like a physical blow. I forced a tight smile, murmured an excuse, and retreated towards the kitchen. And then, I overheard their conversation from the living room. "It must have been so difficult for you, Mark, having to live with outsiders for so long," Richard said, his voice laced with false sympathy. "You have no idea," Mark replied. "It was a nightmare, catering to Alara's every whim. A man shouldn't have to bend to his wife's family demands like that. You just have to put your foot down." I froze, my hand clutching the doorframe. Their voices, punctuated by soft chuckles, were a poison seeping into the quiet grief of the house. This wasn't new. Brenda and Richard had always specialized in a particular brand of genteel cruelty. When Mark and I were married, Brenda had remarked, "Couldn't you have found someone a little more vibrant? I suppose I can't expect beautiful grandchildren." Richard had added with a wink, "They say beauty fades, but with Alara, you'll never be bored of the same old thing." And Mark had just laughed along with them. Standing there, listening to them, a year of suppressed anger and hurt began to bubble to the surface. Neither Mark nor his parents had offered a single word of genuine comfort, not when my father died, not now. They had only offered judgment and ridicule. For months, I had carried the guilt of imposing on Mark, of disrupting his life. Now I saw it clearly. It was not me who should feel guilty. It was his utter failure as a husband, as a human being, that was the true transgression. Just then, Brenda's voice cut through my thoughts. "Alara, dear?" I stepped back into the room, my expression carefully neutral. "Yes." "May I have this?" she asked. In her hand, she held my mother's favorite silk scarf, a beautiful hand-painted piece with hummingbirds and fuchsias that I had given her for her last birthday. I was momentarily confused. "Oh, well, your mother won't be needing it anymore, will she?" Mark chimed in, as if it were the most logical suggestion in the world. "I'll just take it home with me," Brenda declared, holding it up to her neck, admiring her reflection in the darkened windowpane. "It's a lovely color on me." The audacity of it in my mother's home, mere hours after we had laid her to rest, was staggering. Something inside me snapped. I walked over and gently but firmly took the scarf from her hands. "No," I said, my voice low but unwavering. "You can't." Her face, which had been a mask of pleasant entitlement, shifted. It wasn't just about the scarf. It was the shock of me, her placid, accommodating daughter-in-law, finally pushing back. "We haven't begun to sort through my mother's things," I continued, my gaze steady. "When the time is right, her keepsakes will be shared among her family." Brenda's face flushed a blotchy red. "What's that supposed to mean? Are you saying I'm not family?" "At the funeral," I replied, my voice gaining strength, "you said that Mark was an outsider to my mother. If her son-in-law of 25 years is an outsider, then I'm afraid that makes you one as well." Mark and Richard stared at me, their faces mirroring Brenda's angry disbelief. "What did you say?" Mark sputtered. "Apologize to my mother. A daughter-in-law does not speak that way." The commotion brought Leo, Chloe, and Daniel out from the kitchen. "I won't stand for being called an outsider after we made the effort to come all this way," Brenda shrieked, playing the victim for the audience. She grabbed her husband's arm. "We're leaving, Richard." She shot me a look of pure venom and stormed out of the house. Mark, his face a thundercloud of fury, followed them without a backward glance. "Mom, what happened?" Chloe asked, her eyes wide. "Did you really call Grandma an outsider?" Hearing only Brenda's selective, theatrical outrage, it might have sounded as though I had been the aggressor. But as I recounted the conversation, the funeral seating, the attempted theft of the scarf, their faces hardened in my defense. "Grandma and Grandpa have zero emotional intelligence," Chloe said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "That's just how they are, Mom." "And Dad enables them," Leo added, his expression grim. My children sided with me, and in their support, I felt a flicker of strength. But the anger I felt toward those three was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Mark did not come home for several days. I didn't call him. I knew I was not the one who needed to apologize, and I wasn't sure I could forgive him even if he did. The silence in the house was both a relief and a heavy burden. I knew we couldn't continue this way, suspended in a state of undeclared war. Then, one evening, he returned. "Welcome home," I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. He grunted in response, avoiding my eyes. "It's been rough on you," he said. It was a clumsy, graceless attempt at an olive branch, but it was more than I had expected. "You should take the kids, go away for a few days. The mountain air would do good." He handed me a glossy brochure for a quiet lodge in the Cascades, along with a gift certificate. I was stunned into silence. Then, to my own surprise, tears began to stream down my face. Hot, silent tears of confusion and a desperate, flickering hope. Perhaps it was the kid's idea, but he was the one presenting it. Perhaps he felt guilty. Perhaps this was his way of saying he was sorry. "Dad suggested this?" Chloe said on the phone later, her voice full of disbelief. "Wow. Maybe the mothership came and replaced him with a slightly better model." "Don't be cynical, honey," I chided gently, a small smile touching my lips. I think he's trying." I gratefully accepted his offer. "I'll go then." "Good," he said, looking relieved. "Take your time. Stay with Chloe for a few days afterward. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I might stay with my parents for a bit, give you the space you need." He seemed so considerate, so eager for me to go. He saw me off with a wave from the porch. I spent a few precious days with Chloe in her small city apartment, helping her stock her freezer with homemade meals, a simple act of mothering that felt grounding and necessary. Then, the three of us, me, Leo, and Chloe, drove up to the mountains. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and damp earth. We hiked along quiet trails, sat by a crackling fire in the evenings, and talked. We talked about their grandfather's silly jokes and their grandmother's unwavering kindness. We shared memories that were ours alone, a tapestry woven from love and time. The immense weariness from the year of caregiving and the sharp edges of my grief began to soften. I was away for nearly a week. When I dropped the kids back at their respective homes, they hugged me tightly. "That was amazing, Mom," Leo said. "We should actually thank Dad for this one." "Yeah, just this once," Chloe added with a grin. "Though I still think he's up to something." "Oh, hush," I laughed. He was thinking of us in his own way. I drove home along the coastal highway, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I imagined sharing stories of my trip with Mark, of finding a new, quieter path forward for the two of us. I turned onto Maple Lane, my heart feeling lighter than it had in a year. I saw the familiar oak tree at the corner, the neighbor's white picket fence. But where my house should have been, there was nothing. I stopped the car in the middle of the road, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The cottage was gone. In its place was a rectangle of raw, churned earth, littered with splintered wood and broken shingles. A single, resilient rosebush, one my father had planted, stood forlornly at the edge of the destruction. Then, a car pulled up behind me. Mark got out, followed by his parents. They were all smiling, wide, predatory grins that made my blood run cold. "Mark," I whispered, my voice a stranger to my own ears. "What is this? What's happened?" He walked toward me, his smile unwavering. "Finally, I'm rid of that dusty old burden. Starting today, my parents are moving in with me. At my house." I stared at the empty lot, then back at his triumphant face. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Have you lost your mind?" Brenda stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "Your family home has been demolished, dear. Now, hurry up and bring the inheritance to our place. Whatever your mother left you, it belongs to Mark now as your husband." And in that moment, it all clicked into place. The trip, his eagerness for me to be gone, their greed. It was a betrayal so profound, so utterly monstrous, that it defied comprehension. All the hope I had foolishly cultivated on my way home curdled into a grief and rage that was sharper and more painful than anything I had ever felt before. They thought they had won. They thought they had cleared the way for a windfall. And I began to laugh. It wasn't a sound of mirth. It was a wild, raw, unhinged sound that clawed its way out of my throat. It was the laughter of absolute, devastating clarity. My laughter clearly unnerved them. "Why are you laughing?" Mark demanded. "She's gone mad," Brenda muttered, taking a half step back. I finally caught my breath, wiping tears of bitter laughter from my eyes. I looked at their three greedy, expectant faces. "Don't you understand?" I said, my voice shaking with the force of my suppressed emotions. "You're talking about an inheritance? There is no inheritance." I let the words hang in the air, watching the confusion cloud their features. Their entire, destructive, elaborate plan was built on a foundation of pure fantasy. The absurdity of it was so complete, I started laughing again. "What do you mean? Explain yourself," Mark shouted, his face turning purple with rage. I ignored him. I had no obligation to explain the finer points of my family's private affairs to the man who had just leveled my childhood home. "Before we discuss anything else," I said, my voice cold as the winter sea, "I will not be living with you and your parents. If you want to live together, you can do it alone. You cared for your parents in this house." Brenda shrieked. "But you won't care for ours? You know the situation. I thought we agreed you would live with us." "I never agreed to live with you," I corrected her sharply. "You decided that on your own. And as for this," I gestured to the empty lot, the wound in the earth where my home had stood. "There are some things a person just doesn't do. This is unforgivable." I turned my back on them. "Where are you going?" Mark yelled after me. I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed a roof over my head for the night, and I never wanted to see his face again. The next morning, I was in the office of a lawyer, a calm, steady woman named Ms. Albright. Demolishing a house wasn't a simple matter. The property was still legally in my mother's name, part of her estate. As I tearfully explained the situation, a horrifying detail came to light. Mark hadn't just hired a company. He had done it himself. His father, Richard, who had worked in construction years ago, had helped him. They had rented the heavy machinery, called in favors from old contacts, and orchestrated the whole thing with cold, meticulous precision. The travel vouchers, the feigned concern, it was all part of the deception. The realization that my husband had plotted against me with such premeditation was a fresh wave of agony. "Is there any way to make them pay for this?" I asked, my voice thick with tears. Ms. Albright gave me a reassuring smile. "Ms. Vance, your husband illegally demolished a property that was not his. That is destruction of property, a criminal offense, not to mention the civil liability. We will start by sending a formal demand for a full and complete restitution." A few days later, a furious call came from Mark. "What is this certified letter? Are you insane?" "Oh, you received it?" I replied, my voice cool. "You destroyed my home. Of course you have to pay to replace it." "Replace it? It was an old shack nobody was going to live in. I did you a favor. Now stop this nonsense, bring the inheritance and come home," he blustered. "A favor? Don't make me laugh. And what inheritance? We haven't even settled the estate yet." I shot back. He was silent for a moment, clearly stunned by the steel in my voice. He had never heard it before. The truth was, I had spent many quiet hours with my mother in her final year. We had talked about everything, including the estate. Knowing Daniel lived so far away and that I was the one who loved the house, we had made a simple plan. My brother, Daniel, would inherit their financial assets, the stocks and savings. The house on Maple Lane would be mine. That was it. There was no vast fortune for Mark to plunder. "You and your father will either rebuild my house, piece by piece, exactly as it was," I said, knowing it was impossible but needing to say it, "or you will pay the full replacement value detailed in that letter. This is your only chance to settle this without me filing a police report." "I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd be this angry," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. "Of course I'm angry. What did you expect?" I snapped. I knew his twisted logic. If my house was gone, and I came into a large sum of money, he could use it to placate his parents, setting them up somewhere else and finally getting them off his back. He had sacrificed my entire history for his own convenience. "Please, Alara, give me a break. I didn't mean any harm. My dad is sorry too." "If you're truly sorry, you'll pay the settlement," I said, and I hung up the phone. He called and texted incessantly, a barrage of half-hearted apologies and pleas. I stayed with Chloe, my heart a bruised and tender thing. My children and Daniel were my rocks. Daniel was incandescent with rage over the destruction of our childhood home, but he deferred to me. "You do what you need to do, Alara. I'll back you up in any way I can." They all condemned Mark's actions and supported my resolve. A month passed. No money appeared. I couldn't impose on Chloe forever. I needed to move forward, to find my own place. And then, something else happened, something that felt like a desecration. "Mom, look at this," Chloe said one evening, holding out her phone. On the screen was a listing on a popular online marketplace. It was a photograph of a ceramic watering can painted with bluebirds. "My mother's watering can. That's Mama's," I whispered. Chloe quickly navigated to the seller's profile. They were a new user with no reviews. But they had nearly 50 items listed for sale. My mother's antique sewing box. Her collection of porcelain teacups. The well-worn gardening gloves with the leather palms. Her silver locket. It was all there, a lifetime of small treasures laid out for strangers to bid on. I knew instantly who was behind it. I called Mark, my hand shaking with fury. "What is this about the marketplace app?" "App? What are you talking about?" he grumbled. "Don't play dumb with me, Mark. You are selling my mother's things without permission. Take every single one of those listings down. Now. What? No. It wasn't me, he said, his voice rising in panic. Who else could it be? I'm coming over there right now to get every last item back, I said and hung up. Chloe and I got in the car and drove straight to his parents' house, where he was staying. Where are my mother's things? I demanded as he opened the door. I don't know what you're talking about, he stuttered. Tell the truth, Dad, Chloe said, her voice sharp. Just then, Brenda appeared, a bright, false smile on her face. Oh, Chloe! What a lovely surprise! Chloe was not in the mood for pleasantries. Grandma, tell Dad to tell the truth. About what he's doing with the belongings of the grandmother I just lost. He's selling them online. To my astonishment, Brenda burst into a peal of laughter. Mark looked like a trapped animal. It really wasn't me, he insisted. Mark selling them? Brenda trilled. Don't be silly. I'm the one selling them. The blood went cold in my veins. She beamed, completely oblivious. It's a lot of work, you know. Taking nice photos, writing the descriptions. But it's rather fun. A little hobby to keep me busy. She spoke as if she were discussing her knitting. Cancel the listings, Chloe said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and tears. You can't sell those things. Brenda looked offended. What's the big deal? I'm making a little pocket money. It's good for keeping the mind sharp. You want your only remaining grandmother to stay healthy, don't you, dear? Arguing was useless. There was no remorse, no understanding of the violation. I took Chloe's arm. Let's go, honey. It's okay. We're leaving. I pulled her out of the house, and we drove directly to the Port Blossom police station. I had been hesitant to press charges for the house, holding it as leverage. But theft was different. This was a violation I would not let stand. The police acted swiftly. Within hours, Brenda's account was suspended. The sale of my mother's memories was stopped. On the drive back, I called Mark. I had your mother's account frozen. You knew she was doing it, didn't you? That makes you an accomplice. No. I filed a police report, Mark. For theft. I suggest you cooperate with the investigation. What? He shrieked. We're family. You have to withdraw it. Family? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You still haven't paid a cent for the house you destroyed. You've shown no remorse. You let your mother steal from my dead mother. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Despite everything, a lifetime of shared history couldn't be erased overnight. And Mark, your father didn't look well when I saw him. His color is terrible. Has he seen a doctor? I had noticed Richard's gaunt face and sallow complexion during our brief, awful confrontation. I'm not a monster, I said, more to myself than to him. Just tell him to get checked. I hung up. The next day, it was Richard who called me, his voice rasping with fury. What's this I hear about you telling everyone I'm at death's door? Trying to get me out of the way? I have to protect my wife and son from you. I'm not going to any hospital. I was just concerned, I said, shocked. Huh. I'm not frail and short-lived like your parents. Don't you dare compare me to them, he snarled and slammed down the phone. The sheer venom of his words solidified something in me. I was done. Done with their cruelty. Done with their drama. Done with all of them. A few weeks later, Mark called me, his voice choked with panic. Richard had collapsed. He had been diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. The same kind of aggressive, late-stage cancer that had taken my mother. Dad's dying, Alara. What am I going to do? He cried. A bitter laugh escaped me. I don't know, Mark. What did he say when I suggested he see a doctor? That he wasn't frail and short-lived like my parents? I guess you'll have to figure it out on your own. How can you be so cold? He wept. Did you, or your father, or your mother, ever once offer me a single word of warmth when my mother was dying? Take a good, long look at your own actions, I said, and ended the call. Richard passed away less than a month later. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sorrow. Just a vast, empty quiet where my connection to that family used to be. After the funeral, Richard's will was read. He left the bulk of his estate to be divided between Brenda and Mark. But there was a specific bequest. My house and the property it sits on, I leave to my grandson, Leo Vance. Richard had always had a strange fixation on Leo, seeing him as the carrier of the Vance name. It was a poisoned gift. You should renounce it, Leo, I told him. You don't need that house or the memories attached to it. But Leo, my thoughtful, quiet son, just smiled. No, Mom. I think I'll accept it. Brenda was thrilled, paying the inheritance taxes with a flourish. He's our heir, after all. It's only right. She seemed to think this cemented Leo's place in their fractured world, and I felt a pang of sadness, as if she were trying to claim a part of my son. A few weeks later, I got a frantic call from Mark. You have to come over here. Now. I drove to the familiar street, and when I arrived, I saw a scene of such perfect, breathtaking irony that I had to stop the car to fully absorb it. Mark and Brenda were standing on the lawn, their faces masks of horror, watching as their own home was systematically dismantled. Not by a rogue crew, but by a legitimate, city-sanctioned demolition team. And standing on the sidewalk, holding a set of blueprints and calmly observing the process, was my son, Leo. Leo, what are you doing? Mark screamed over the roar of the machinery. It's my house now, Dad, Leo said, his voice calm and clear. I can do what I want with it. What have you done? Brenda wailed, clutching at her heart. Leo finally turned to look at them, his gentle face hardened into something I had never seen before. Did you forget what you did to my mother? Did you forget you tore down her home? My grandparents' home. He looked at Brenda. Did you ever even apologize for what you did, Grandma? They crumpled, falling to their knees on the grass as a giant excavator claw tore into the roof of the house they had lived in for 40 years. And watching them, I finally felt the cold, hard knot in my stomach begin to dissolve. Mark used his portion of the inheritance to pay the settlement for my mother's house in full. Leo, with methodical precision, recovered every last one of my mother's stolen belongings and brought them to me. You've always got me and Chloe, Mom, he said, as I wept with relief, cradling my mother's locket in my hand. Mark and Brenda, homeless and with their remaining funds severely depleted, moved back into the streamlined shipping company housing they had so smugly vacated. I imagine the gossip is relentless. It is, as they say, their own doing. After all that, I stayed with Chloe for a time, finding my footing in the quiet of her apartment. Then, one sunny afternoon, Leo came to visit. He was engaged now to a wonderful young woman who was also an architect. They had bought a small plot of land overlooking the water, not far from Port Blossom. He spread a set of blueprints out on Chloe's coffee table. We're building our own place, Mom, he said, his eyes shining. Small, sustainable, full of light. He pointed to a section of the plan, a beautifully designed but modest space connected to the main house by a covered breezeway. It had its own entrance, a small kitchenette, and a large window facing the sea. And we were hoping you'd want to live here. His fiancée smiled at me, her expression open and welcoming. I looked at the plans, at the space they had designed for me, not as an obligation, but as an invitation. I couldn't keep leaning on Chloe forever. It was time for a new beginning. I am free from that burden. Starting today, my parents are moving in with me at my house. Or rather, I am moving in with my children into a home we will build together. A home built not on greed or obligation, but on a foundation of respect, boundaries, and a love that is as steady and enduring as the tide. I am thinking of the garden I will plant, of the books I will read by that window overlooking the sea, of living a happy, quiet life with my new family. And I am determined not to become a mother-in-law like my own,